The carnage in our care homes is a scar upon this country that will never heal. And not just, of course, our care homes. You heard earlier from John in Edgware, who lost his daughter Susie early on in the crisis and feels and felt and still feels completely abandoned. And all of these personal tragedies, all of these private miseries, completely ignored and glossed over by the government, that it leaves the question of whether or not it is deliberate. And, you know, a couple of people have been, not cross probably, but a little unhappy with me this morning for even suggesting that it might be a bit excessive to wonder or to worry about that. To suggest, as I did earlier, that possibly I sound a little bit tinfoil hatty. But I do think it's probably true that the confusion is deliberate, not necessarily as callous as some of my correspondents would attest, but deliberate in the sense that they didn't know what else to do. So they sort of did a curious combination of nothing and everything. And that's why today, even looking at the next stage of the lockdown being loosened, we don't know what is going on. And yes, all right, I'm throwing away the tinfoil hat. I think that is the plan. I'm really sorry. But the fact that none of us know what is going on, what we're supposed to do, what the international lessons we could learn might be, that is the plan. And it leads inevitably. I've got no quibble with what Sarah in Cheltenham said a moment ago. It's been rendered inevitable by months of incompetence and deceit and dishonesty and dissembling and disingenuousness and sundry other words beginning with D, hasn't it? It's been rendered inevitable, this next chapter, by the mess of the last three chapters. You get now to a complete, I mean, almost incomparable crisis in this country, caused in large part by government incompetence and government deception, and Dominic Cummings, it's another word that begins with D. And the next chapter is defined by the last three chapters. And the next chapter has to involve some attempt to get the tills ringing again, because the cost of not doing that, well, it's huge. The cost of doing it, of course, might be huge as well. But it becomes a question, and this is bleak stuff. I never say my friends as a kind of as a sort of catchphrase for people listening to the programme. I always prefer to think of myself as addressing you directly, like there's one person listening. But sometimes I do feel this sense of community that seems lacking in so many other areas of our lives at the moment. So when I say my friends, I mean my friends. That is the price. The price is potentially more loss. And at some point that price becomes not just, I would never say worth paying, but it becomes an inevitable price to pay for having a country to return to at the end of this crisis, this catastrophe, however it unfolds, having a country to return to that is fit for purpose, that is functioning. You know, some incredibly apocalyptic reports from the Bank of England yesterday. But again, everything's gone so bonkers that they went largely unnoticed.
I think James is being extremely naive here. It's not incompetence that the government is engaging in. The reason I say that is because they aren't making any attempt to fix the problem, to clean their house. If they were truly interested in fixing the mistakes that they have made during this crisis, they wouldn't be ignoring them. Those responsible for those mistakes would have been fired. They would have been replaced with someone who was competent. But that's not the case. This is not incompetence. This is by design. This whole crisis can be viewed within the Brexit prism. Lie, confuse, use empty slogans to maintain that confusion, and then protect the government from any blame. It has always been, it is, and it will always be about protecting the government and protecting the party. I've talked about this before, how the government are afraid of a future public inquiry. Now, on that actual issue, Boris Johnson was asked in Parliament about having a public inquiry, and he rejected the idea. He said, we're not going to have a public inquiry. So that was telling for me. If the government are not making any mistakes, if they're following the science, as they have said on numerous occasions, continually have said this, we are following the science, then why would they be afraid of a public inquiry? Why would Boris Johnson be afraid of defending in court his position, the actions that he has taken, and the actions taken by his cabinet members. But instead, he's afraid of a public inquiry. Now, while he has rejected the idea of a public inquiry, that doesn't mean it's completely dead. It's highly possible it could be requested after Boris Johnson leaves office, but I think that would be at a point that's too late. It would be much better to have a public inquiry at the moment, but I know that these things don't normally work in that way. However, a public inquiry would be able to access the information that the SAGE committee gave to the government. It would be able to access the type of influence that Dominic Cummings had within that committee, and what type of advice was followed by the government and what advice was ignored by the government in dealing with the pandemic. And one final question I want to ask is, where is their humanity? And what I mean by that is, where is Boris Johnson's humanity? Boris Johnson went through the coronavirus. He experienced it. Where is Johnson's humanity towards his fellow British citizens? Those who have gone through the coronavirus, those who have been touched by it, loved ones, friends, colleagues. Where is the humanity towards them? I believe this leads into a further issue. Where is the humanity of the average Tory? I'm talking about the rank and file. I'm not talking about the likes of Dominic Cummings, Jacob Rees-Mogg or Ian Duncan-Smith, who I actually doubt have any humanity. But I'm talking about ordinary supporters, ordinary voters, ordinary members of the party. Do they not have any humanity left? Do they truly not care about their fellow citizens? I really don't have any answers for that. If you do, let me know in the comments, as your comments are greatly appreciated, as always. Thanks. Why not become a Patreon and enjoy access to our Discord server where we share news, chat, and have some fun? If you become a patron, you can also make video suggestions on topics that are important to you. Check it out via the link in the description.